Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about realistic expectations when you are studying medical terminology. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, the number one thing that will run off a potential brand new medical coder even before they start is that medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology. These three things often scare people the most, and they get overwhelmed, and a lot of times they don't really know the proper way to start studying it, or how much of it do they have to know, or how much of it do they need to memorize. So I got a really good comment that I think speaks for a lot of students, and I'm going to read it and then we're going to get into it. So here we go. Thank you to the viewer who wrote this in. They said, "Hi Blue, this has been a very helpful video that I've come across so far, and believe me, I've been looking for months." They commented on the tips for self-study medical billing and coding video that I have, and I'll leave that link in the description box. I'm enrolled in the AAPC and taking the medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology courses. They allow the online material usage for 4 months for the medical terminology and anatomy. I'm 3 weeks in and not even close to finishing what I feel is a thorough review of the medical terminology part. So I'm taking a deep breath and trying not to panic. I bought your recommended medical terminology book along with the AAPC online books, and I feel like I have a good foundation, but I'm a little worried about how long I'm spending trying to memorize and sufficiently learn all the terms. Any advice on how deeply I need to really understand and know these terms before moving on to the anatomy portion? AAPC isn't much help with these types of questions. I'll be doing the instructor-led online courses for the actual CPC portion whenever I feel that I have a good grasp on the prerequisites mentioned above. Thanks. So here's the thing. When it comes to memorizing things, medical terminology is a new language that you have to know up front. It is a brand new language. And so when you are learning a new language, you have to immerse yourself in it. You have to spend time learning it, and you can't get impatient with yourself for not learning it fast enough. Only spending 3 weeks and you feel like you're not as far into the medical terminology as you should be tells me one of two things. One, that you are not setting a realistic goal for yourself, because 3 weeks is still very early on, right? And you have four total months with, to do all of this stuff. So one, you need to start setting realistic expectations. Number two, it also tells me that if you feel like you're not as far in as you should be, then you're probably not spending a sufficient amount of time with the course just yet. I have always stated that when you are studying medical billing and coding, that you need to be studying for 20 hours minimum per week. The reason that I say this, and it does not matter if you have a full-time job, everybody who takes these things seriously will make the time. Even if you work 40 hours a week, you can still squirrel away 20 hours per week. If you are not using 20 hours a week to study, it's going to take you forever. 20 hours is doable. 20 hours is you're able to still have a life, and you're still able to do your things at home, and you're still able to do your work. The key is to setting a schedule and taking advantage of the little bits of time that you have during the day that you're not doing something that you can spend studying. Now, the great thing about medical terminology is that you can listen to it, you can practice it, you can go over flashcards. People always fight me on these flashcards, guys. I'm trying to help you guys out. So if you're writing me telling me that you don't want to do flashcards, you're getting blocked. Flashcards are a way to connect your brain and your body to doing a task, and that's how you start to pick up things a lot faster. I'm telling you guys how it's very easy and helpful to learn if you're willing to take those extra steps. Making your own flashcards and not using whole terms in medical terminology, but instead concentrating on learning your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. If you can learn those, and it's roughly about 600 of those that are really, really important, you're going to be able to connect and build words. Because once you know the prefix, the suffix, and the root word, then you're going to say, okay, this word means inflammation, or this part of the word, the suffix means inflammation. This other part means this, and whatever you, so then you can, piece them together that way. So that way you're not trying to memorize whole terms. If you're trying to memorize whole terms, you're literally wasting your time. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of medical terms, and it is nearly impossible to be able to memorize them all. But if you are able to use the study method of learning prefixes, suffixes, and root words, then you're able to piece those words together, and then you'll be able to move on a lot faster. So squirreling in 20 hours per week, very easy. I've said in my analogy before, if you have a 30-minute drive to work, and you have a 30-minute drive home, and you have a 30-minute lunch, you can be listening to very good channels on YouTube. And I'm not going to leave my recommendations because I've left them many times and people want to sit here and complain. So I share them on my Patreon channel. If you're not familiar, Patreon is a lot like YouTube, and I do a lot of medical terminology and anatomy things on my Patreon channel. So you pay to support the creator on Patreon, and right now the minimum pledge is $10 per month, but this will give you access to all of the crossword puzzles, the word finds, and all of the games that I post for medical terminology, along with the coding quizzes that I do have that I post on my Patreon channel. If you want to subscribe for a month to just check it out and see how it is, and then cancel your subscription after that, that's totally fine. I don't expect people to support the channel every month. This is to help you, and the funds that I raise from my Patreon channel go directly to my education. So it's a win-win for all, I think, because you get access to quite a bit of games and puzzles and quizzes and everything that you can download. But that aside, if you are taking the time to listen to any of those channels that I recommend on there, you can be spending 30 minutes during your drive listening, right? And then you have your 30-minute lunch, if you have a 30-minute lunch. And you can be having your headphones or listening to your phone or whatever and eating your lunch. You can still do that. I mean, you can listen better than talking, just office gossip, right? So you can sit there and listen to those things, or you can look at your flashcards or whatever, and then you have 30 minutes on your drive home. That's already an hour and a half. That is already an hour and a half during the day that you've done listened to that medical terminology. And even if it doesn't make sense to you right now, the fact that you're repetitively listening to it, it's your brain starting to learn, okay, this is something new, we got to pay attention. So with that, you have your hour and a half that day, during the day, and then you have an hour and a half at home. Now, I've always said, don't study for more than 1 hour at a time. We as adults have a lot on our minds, and it is very hard to study for more than 1 hour at a time. Your brain will not retain as much information if you try to cram, if you try to study in long sprints at a time. We're not in high school anymore, folks. In high school, we didn't have to worry about all that stuff. We didn't have the grown-up stuff that we do now. So with that, teenagers can study for hours at a time and it's no big deal. But we as adults need to limit it to 1 hour at a time. Give yourself a 15 or 30-minute break and then come back to it. So if you have all that time that you spent in the car and at work listening to your medical terminology, then you get home and you have just an hour and a half to do. That's just, okay, an hour, and then you take a break, and then you do another 30 minutes, and then boom, there's your 3 hours in one day. 3 hours in one day. Now, if you are able to discipline yourself enough that you can do this Monday through Friday, guess what? You have 15 hours that you've already studied during the week, listening to medical terminology or listening to something else, your coding guidelines or any of those other things, right? So you have 15 hours. Now you got 5 hours left. So you have the weekend. You have Saturday or Sunday, or both Saturday and Sunday. You can spread it out. I recommend taking at least 1 day off per week of study that you don't study. If you want to do 2 days off, that's totally fine. Then make sure that you are spreading out those other 5 hours also during the week. So that way you can have the weekend to yourself and your family. It doesn't take that you have to immediately sacrifice everything. I don't know why people think that I would suggest that. I am all about striking that good balance. If you are able to balance out your studies and balance out the time, everything's going to come out a lot more even. Is it going to be stressful because you don't know? Yes. In the beginning, it will always be stressful. When we were children, we had to learn our letters and numbers first before we started like learning to read books or to do mathematics, right? We didn't just jump in and start reading before we learned our letters, because you have to learn your letters and then learn the sounds that they make in order to make the words and sound out the words. It's the same thing with medical terminology. If you give yourself the opportunity to listen and learn, you're going to absorb it a lot better, and it's going to be able to retain a lot more than if you're just sitting there just trying to resent the fact that you have to study and then work through these things and it doesn't make sense. If you are working through your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words, you're going to learn it a lot better. And you have to make it fun for yourself. So changing that up by doing the flashcards, listening to the YouTube channels that I recommend, working through the workbooks that I recommend for medical terminology is going to make it a lot better for you. Because then once you get done with that part, working through the workbook that you have, this AAPC is providing, then you can go on to the anatomy. And again, you can practice the same thing of listening, right? On your way to work, while at work, and on your way home, and then still studying in the evening. And then also, you can put up anatomy posters around. So when you put up in your study area, you should always have a study area, an area that's dedicated to all of what you have to do. I saw this thing, I think it was on TikTok. It was either on TikTok or Instagram, one of the two. So the lady, she has little kids and her husband, and she was going back to school and studying. So she would take her laptop into, they have a walk-in closet, and she would take her laptop in there and she would do her schoolwork so that she could do it in peace. She had to do that so that she could get through her studies. Well, her husband was kind enough to make a little fold-down desk area so that she could have a space where she could just sit there and work on her schoolwork and have nobody around bothering her. But she was able to set up her little laptop there, plug it in, and she had all of her things up so that she could look at them and it could help her to be able to recall. And I think that is wonderfully supportive. I love to see that. I love to see adults who have other adults who are being supportive of their journey in learning. You know, education and learning and going back to school when you're an adult is very difficult as it is. So it does take having a very good supportive team. However, if you do not have a supportive team, then you're going to have to rely on yourself. You're going to have to dig deep within yourself to find that energy when you don't feel like studying, when you don't feel like doing all of the things that you know that you're supposed to do. And if you miss a day of study, and if you got too busy that day, it's okay. Forgive yourself. Move on and start studying again the next day. Just pick the ball back up and keep going. Don't stop just because you stopped for only one day. I've seen people do that where they say, well, Blue, I couldn't keep up with the schedule, so I just quit. You know, it's not about how many times you fall down. It's about how many times you get back up. So again, if you want to get into this, this is a very great field. However, it is not for everyone. There are a lot of people who think that they can do it because they've been sold a dream and, oh yes, it's so easy. And if somebody's telling you that medical coding is easy, they are wrong. And they are probably trying to sell you a product. I have never said that medical coding is easy. I have always said it is difficult to learn, but it is not impossible. And that if you truly do want this, you'll find the time to do the studies. You'll find the time to make the flashcards and to learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words so that you can concentrate on the building blocks of medical terminology so that it's not so overwhelming. I've seen people who told me, well, Blue, I was trying to work through the medical dictionary and I just got so overwhelmed. Of course, you're going to get overwhelmed because you're trying to start from a dictionary. It's not the right way, guys. The medical terminology books that I do recommend, I recommend for a reason because they're good, you know. Just like when I tell you guys I recommend the Optum 360, ICD-10-CM, ICD-10-PCS, code books as well as the HCPCS code book as well from Optum360. There's a reason that I recommend those. Not that they pay me, because this is not an ad for them, but I recommend them because they're very good. They have a lot of really good information. It's the same thing when I am recommending the medical terminology and anatomy books that I do recommend. And I tell you guys these things as far as like the study tips and how to study and what you should do is because this has worked for me. Now, I've been a medical coder since 2008. I was a student of medical coding in 2007. I got 2 credentials last year with AHIMA, the CCSP and the CCS. I started off my career in 2008 with a CCA, and I held on to that CCA for as long as I could for many years because I wanted to prove to people that the CCAs could do a lot. And I've trained doctors, I've trained nurses, I've trained other medical coders, and I've trained a lot of people. So because I really love what I do. Now again, if you're going to get overwhelmed, you got to watch yourself when it comes to the medical terminology part, because this is just the beginning. And again, if you have taken the time to look through any of my videos that I talk about medical terminology, breaking it down, the tips on how to learn it, my tips here that I've shared today, these are meant to help you, okay? You don't have to get those medical terminology books that say medical terminology for medical coders, because that's just a sales gimmick. We use the same medical terminology as doctors and nurses because everybody uses the same language, okay? It is a universal language, this medical terminology. So don't be taken by those things that, oh, that it's going to make it easy or whatever. No, you have to learn medical terminology the appropriate way. So by learning your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words. Concentrate on those so that way you can patch the words together and it's going to be a lot easier and quicker for you to understand. At least that's just my advice anyway. But get on a schedule and make sure that you set yourself on a schedule. If you get bored with what you're doing, as far as like I'm reading from a book, then you need to turn on a video, or you need to turn on something that you can listen to, so that way you can change it up and your brain doesn't get, into that, hypnotic fog, because it's just like, oh, I don't want to learn this. I don't want to learn this. You have to learn this. This is very important. Medical terminology and anatomy is critical to medical coders. It bothers me when I see medical coders try to skim over this, or it really makes me mad when I see instructors say, oh, you can learn that on the job. No, ma'am, no, sir. You need to learn it, and you need to take the time to learn it, because it's only going to be beneficial to you, because you still have to pass an assessment test when you go to apply for these jobs. And you never know if medical terminology is going to be on those assessment tests. I've had quite a few assessment tests, and I have always been tested on medical terminology somehow, some way. I'm just saying. So with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. If you are curious about anything that I do recommend, I do have my affiliate links for Amazon in the description box below. You do not have to click on the links, guys. The title is there, so you can take the title and you can put it in wherever you find your books. I also recommend, if you have the public library open in your area, that you should visit the public library. There's no sense in having to spend money where you don't need to. You may be able to find workbooks at the library that you can work from. Okay, so that is another advice that I have there. Take the time to look around, look through the channels on YouTube. Again, if you're interested in knowing the specific channels that I recommend, check out my Patreon channel. I will leave that link again in the description box below. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that this video was helpful. If it was, I hope that you will share it, like it, subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.